Man, Matt Yglesias is on a cope streak that is for the record books. And the latest thing that he's moderating on in order to reach a mainstream position as like a good little popularist is Israel. And I do love this. Now, what I'm not saying is that Matt Yglesias has come to a principled stance on Israel in the face of, very obvious evidence that he has been extremely wrong on the topic over the years. No. What this is, like all of his positions, is him fleeing at full speed, just like, Naruto running away from reality and towards what he thinks the polls are going to do next. And of course, because it's Israel and moderates are very sticky when it comes to Israel. They have a lot of faith, dare I say, that the United States will always be extremely pro-Israel. And even when the polls showed like a precipitous drop in support for Israel because of the whole videos of children getting burned alive situation that people were confronting, they had to something had to give, and it looks like he's finally arrived on a position which is dog shit, but it's a type of dog shit which is slightly less it is slightly less of an olfactory assault than his normal product that he puts out. Now, far be it from me to give this motherfucker money for his shitty ass Substack, but I do think we owe it to the man to read, just a little bit to get the idea of the direction of the argument. And then you can hear what I think about it. And as you can tell, I'm a huge fan of his. So, you can imagine that I'll have really a glowing review. Back in 2014, when the Israeli-Palestine conflict was getting less attention, I had the chance to interview Barack Obama about foreign policy. It was an interesting moment in my career, sure. And I resolved, if I got the chance to ask him what I thought was an underrated question: setting aside the many controversies about the conflict, what is the justification for giving direct financial assistance to a country that is not poor? Banger Matty Y opinion. Matty Yglesias is so funny. Yeah, like setting aside the genocide thing, setting aside the apartheid thing, setting aside the fact that Israel is like openly disrespectful to this country, constantly getting us into disastrous confrontations. Why would we give someone money when they have money? This is a much better thing to talk about. And this was in the context of the pivot to Asia, rest in peace. And he gave an answer that mentioned a bunch of bullshit. This had nothing to do with Israel, but the Philippines is poor. Israel is on par with France and Japan. And he's got this neat little graph, a favorite of the moderate Democrat. And I have to say, if there's anything that I like about the moderate Democrats, it is that they do like good data visualization. I'll hand them that. And yeah, Israel rich, other countries poor. I don't think not this one, not for long. But he makes, I guess, a point, which is that like they don't need the help. Okay. And by the way, he wouldn't have made this point just even a few months ago, which is funny because he asked Obama this question, but reading the stuff he's been talking about since the October 7th attack, I would never have guessed that he would have done that. And I think it does show that this isn't a principled guy. This is a guy who, dips back into a specific topic when it seems opportune, which is, I don't even know if that would be an insult to him, honestly, because like, isn't he kind of proud of the fact that he's like quite opportunistic? Anyway, Obama said our relationship with Israel is in many ways unique. It's our strongest ally in the region. Our people-to-people ties there are unmatched. Blech. And partly because of world history, the vulnerabilities of a Jewish population in the midst of a really hostile neighborhood can create a special obligation for us to help them. What a bullshit line. I think the more interesting question is if you look at our foreign assistance as a tool in our national security portfolio as opposed to charity. You combine our defense budget with our diplomatic budget and our foreign assistance budget, and then in that mix, there's a lot more that we should be doing when it comes to helping Honduras and Guatemala build an effective criminal justice system, effective police, and economic development that creates jobs. Okay, wow. God, don't you guys miss the Obama nothing statement? This is fascinating because, like, we never helped those countries build an effective criminal justice system. We didn't, like, It's funny because we do so much foreign assistance, but there is something uniquely effective about our assistance to Israel, because Israel's only purpose with said assistance is to incinerate children. Meanwhile, any kind of constructive goal, gosh, it just seems like we can't quite hit the mark with that. It just seems like we have a hard time doing it. Okay. And okay, I'm going to give you, these are the points that he deigned to put at the top. So I'm going to assume those are his high priority points. And this is basically what he said on Twitter. So, you know, good faith analysis. Giving money to a country that is much richer than its rivals does not make a lot of sense. And the case against doing so can be made in ways that do not require endorsing particularly dramatic criticisms of Israel. It's so obvious what he's doing here. It's like, first of all, the reason Democrats are 70-30 on Israel has nothing to do with money. That isn't what this is. To the extent that it has anything to do with money, it is about the moral implications of the money directly going from your pocket, from your paycheck. Your employer is cutting it out and sending it to the government. The government is sending it to a contractor who is building bombs, who send it to Israel, who is shooting the bombs, and I cannot emphasize this enough, on video to blow people up. And then you, again, it comes back to you on your feed through your friends, through people you know, and you have to watch people get killed by things that you paid for. This is only a money issue in the most superficial of ways. You know what I mean? It is simply that we are enabling them. So the idea of making the case against helping Israel from a purely economic perspective, I mean, sure, yes, okay. It is true that to the extent we're giving someone assistance to defend themselves, if they are like this massive muscular figure in a sea of wimps and they're constantly giving all of their neighbors noogies and flushing their heads down the toilet, yeah, like in principle, and for this hypothetical country, sure, you could at least dial back whatever aid you're giving to them. But I feel like this does ignore the fact that if that country is justified and is getting attacked or whatever, which Israel is absolutely not, they are, to the extent Israel is ever under attack, it is almost always in direct response to an extreme amount of aggression from Israel, or it's directly in response to the genocide of the Palestinians, or it's directly a result of the displacement that comes from Israel's ethnic cleansing. So, like, even in this hypothetical, if I had a country who is actually justified, but they're stronger than their neighbors, I mean, I would probably say, well, make them even stronger than their neighbors. You know, they're in the right. The most stable situation is one where there's no chance of them, you know, still getting in fights with people. You know what I mean? So it's like, as long as that entity is actually under the rules of war, or just like common conceptions of morality in the right, then yeah, like I don't actually care about the money so much, especially because our foreign aid budget is actually like fairly small in the grand scheme of things. Like people think it should be bigger than it is, and they think that it is much bigger than it is. Does that make sense? I think it's something like we spend like 1% of the budget on foreign aid, and then people think it's 10%, and people or like people think that it's 20%, but they think it should be 10%. Meanwhile, it's 1/20th of the size they think it is. So I don't know. This seems like it's the most interesting thing about Matt's opinion here is that it's very obvious that he has finally picked up on where the wind is blowing, and he's trying in the most like limp-wristed way imaginable to meet the moment by being nominally anti-Israel, but not because I want to take a stance on Israel's actions, and also because he thinks that he's staking out a moderate position where divest and sanction the entity committing genocide is the extreme, no aid is the middle, giving aid is the right. He thinks that's where we're moving. And I think this couldn't be further from the truth, because I truly believe, and maybe I'm naive or something, that the videos and images and text coming out of Israel itself has negatively polarized the American population in a way which pro-Palestinian activism has never managed to achieve, and which continues to not achieve. And that isn't like a big dig at pro-Palestinian activism, which is like a decentralized movement with many people of many different positions trying to work together to engage in actions that have realistically a very small chance of success. So they have a lot of challenges against them, but I really don't think that they are the reason that people are now pro-Palestine. I think the reason that Americans are pro-Palestine is literally seeing how Israelis act and talk, which is openly genocidal and openly fascistic. I don't think people knew just how far right Israeli society is and how openly it is, okay? And also, because it's easy to translate what people say now, I think Americans are actually able to get an in-depth look at how Israeli government talks to the Israeli people, and they can see that it is very far right, that it is very ethno-nationalist, and like, I think that that is negatively polarizing. Throw in all of the weird AI imagery of like Israel as the lion eating Palestine as the rat, where like even the dumbest liberal American will look at that and say like, okay, I mean, that's a red flag. And of course, the elephant in the room here is that this is a live streamed genocide. Like, people in Palestine, in Gaza and the West Bank are videotaping the things that are happening to them. They're getting put up on Twitter. They're getting put up on Telegram. People are seeing this stuff. And, you know, for what it's worth, if you're someone who watches a lot of that stuff, I want you to ask yourself, like, how much value there is to you personally to bear witness to these atrocious acts, which are happening in Gaza, but everyone should know that as long as I've been alive, and as long as you've been alive, things like this have been happening around the world, either in isolated incidents or in systematic genocide, okay? That's true of the Rohingya, that's true in the Congo, that's true in Sudan. And this is not to diminish the genocide in Gaza, but I can only imagine what world I would live in now if the genocide which Saudi Arabia perpetrated against Yemen when I was in college through mass starvation and blockade, if that had been live streamed the way the genocide in Gaza is, I am so curious what world I would live in now. I do not think it would be the same. So on the one hand, I recognize that it's important that people see things that they never thought they would see. These horrible moments, these most desperate and tragic moments that humanity finds itself in, are now visible for the average person who up until now was quite sheltered from that. And I want you, if you watch a lot of those videos, to ask yourself, would you watch all of those moments if you could on Earth that are happening right now? What would the use be to you to watch all of those moments? And what is your goal taking on that emotional burden? Because when you see these things, when you are sharing in these moments, essentially, and inevitably, from almost all people, you take on an emotional burden. And I do every time that I see these videos. And I want you to ask the price to yourself and what it means, because I think there are people who have seen quite a lot of these who choose to continue, and I think it harms them. And I think that the harm it does to them outweighs any benefits of continued watching. Because while it's important to bear witness, you know, hobbling yourself mentally, spiritually, emotionally, stops you from doing things that matter to you and which matter in your life. And no matter how dark things get in the human world, life always goes on. You are always valuable to your loved ones, you know what I mean, emotionally, like intrinsically, and your community, and for pro-Palestinian activism, as a matter of fact. The energy that you can bring to any particular given day is valuable and important. So if you're watching these videos, I think you should do a sober assessment of what it is taking away from you, and maybe you should quantify that. You can only, I was just talking in an earlier segment about how hard it is to quantify moral and ethical things, and to avoid doing so, but I want you to think relativistically, maybe, about what you lose and what you could do if you still had that energy, what you could do for your community, what you could do for Palestine, what you could do for your neighbors or your friends, your family, anyone, and yourself, which is also valuable. And consider that next time you're about to open one of those up. Okay, I'm not telling anyone not to watch the live streamed genocide, because if people weren't watching it, then people wouldn't be fighting it. So it matters, that people see some of this stuff. But I know there are a lot of people who appear to be drowning in quicksand, watching content that is far beyond their emotional capacity, and it is hurting them severely. And I care about those people. I don't think they need to be sacrificed in order for pro-peace, anti-genocide activism to work. Okay? And if you're in an activist space, or if you have friends who care about this issue as I do, check in with them. Check in with them. It matters a lot. That doesn't mean the answer is to check out and stop reading about it. Doesn't mean the answer is to unplug from the news or to disengage from activism. But I think it begs the question. And on that note, I hope everyone has a great night. I've got to go, and thank you to everyone who showed up and checked out my stream.